You've heard of using Figma for UI, but what about designing ebooks and print materials with crop marks and all? This isn't a website. This is a print project in Figma. That's right, Figma. So one of the ways that I like to use Figma for print projects is when I design one-sheets. Now, what's cool about using Figma for one-sheets is that it allows me to create style sheets. It's so much easier for importing images and using SVG files as well. The other cool thing is if your company already uses Figma for website design, you can import the library and make sure that all of your style sheets and your colors and everything are already on brand by using that library. So what you'll need to do is, if you are going to print your project, you're going to need to create trim marks and bleed. So I found a plugin that's really useful. It's called Print for Figma. The first thing you'll notice is there's a pro version that you can get, but there's also a free version that's available right away that allows you to have up to 4 uses per week. Now, once you do an 8.5 by 11 layout with bleed and crop marks, you will find that you'll be able to reuse it. So you want to make sure and go in here, create your bleed, and enable crop marks. So once you hit create, you'll find that you get a trim box and crop marks. So the first thing you'll notice is that you're going to need to create bleeds for your design. So the first thing you want to do is uncheck clip content on your frame, and that allows you to increase the size of your objects on your page to cover the bleed. So the other way that I use Figma for print projects is I create ebooks in Figma, and you can export out an entire PDF of pages, and it works great. In order to get page numbers, I also have a plugin for that, and that plugin is Auto Page Number. So that creates page numbers, and one of my tricks is that once it gives you all the page numbers on each of your frames, you group them and create them as a style sheet, and that way you can modify them all together and not have to go do that one by one. The other cool thing you can do is create links inside of the copy and open up web pages. So I find that pretty helpful if you're creating a PDF ebook. So those are my tricks for creating print work using Figma.